the richest private citizen in the world. And someone asked him allegedly, Mr. Getty, you're like the richest private citizen in the world. Like, how much more money do you need? And his answer at that time was just a little bit more. The richest private citizen in the world. And someone asked him,
Hi there, welcome to KLF Different Roles, Shared Goals. We're here for another episode with Darshan Kulkarni and myself, Edie Edens. Welcome, welcome. So today we want to talk about, should one site get paid more than another? Should one site accept less than another? Is there rationale for that? But where I really want to talk about this today is in the more practical fair market value analysis, right? So empowering both sites and sponsors, because again, different roles, shared goals, to negotiate fairly, genuinely, and not boilerplate based on the actual cost for what they're asking a site network, a hospital to do. And where do you go as a sponsor to get your best and most competitive offer price versus where do you go as a site to justify, no, I actually do cost more than this other site. And it's not just because I have better patient referrals, right? Which would be out of the realm of reimbursement.
I think it comes down to what do you bring to the table? And you can't say, I bring a KOL, because that's not value that is paid for in research.
Yeah.
What you can say is, I think, a really good argument you put out there, Edie, was when you said, we have more patients. You want to do the study, you want to enroll faster, fair market value would be higher because we have more patients. And not based on, I have access to, well, then you're really talking database size and the like, and where you are. We were at SOS, and one of the sites came out and said, "What? Just because I'm in rural Idaho, why should I be paid less than someone in New York City?" And I didn't understand the logic behind that argument. I just don't understand, if you are a central location. I mean, because you're in central Idaho, your cost of living is lower, so the price you get paid is going to be different. And to say that you should be paid the same as someone in New York is, it misses the point in many ways. But what's your take, Edie?
So I had a similar reaction. I didn't understand it, although admittedly, the part of the conversation I walked in on that I heard that I understand it even less than what you just said was the opposite. Someone saying, look, regardless of whether I'm New York City or Central Idaho, and this was, again, they didn't realize they were suggesting price fixing. They were simply
Right.
saying, wouldn't it make life easier for all of us if across the board we agreed to some fixed pricing so that then when you negotiate a budget, everyone's already agreed X procedure is worth this amount of money. I'm sitting there thinking what you're thinking in reverse, right? Well, for some of you, you're going to lose money if you agree to this. And some of you will actually gain because you will, you'll move up. But why would the sites who are already getting paid, probably frankly, not quite what they need to be even for their, downtown New York City environment, couldn't agree to even less just to subsidize central Idaho? That's not, I mean, we all want each other to succeed in the ecosystem, but I can't cut my prices and my overhead in the middle of downtown New York City to fit central Idaho just because I like you. I mean, that could end my business, that could close my site. And I also think it's very different too when you look across stratified pricing models where, if you're big pharma, even medium-sized pharma, and you're doing a multi-site, multi-state trial, you're going to use some independent research sites, some site networks, and some academic or conglomerate health centers. They all negotiate prices very differently based on whether or not they're grant funded, state funded, whether or not they have pass through fund. I mean, like there's like so many nuances that go into how they negotiate their prices. That's the other piece. And I'm not saying that that convoluted way of doing things is like, oh, we've always done it this way, so we should. No, 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 no. But I am saying because some of those sites are academic or federal receive federal grant funds, and also some are independent sites and do not, it's truly a different schema for what they can and can't negotiate. So they automatically have to cost different prices. I mean, that's already happening. What I think would be more fair would be, again, if we had a not owned by a pharmaceutical company and not owned by a CRO, but an actual proper database of costs. I mean, if I'm moving, if I'm relocating professionally from Indianapolis to LA, I can very quickly come up with the data to negotiate my salary to ensure that my cost of living change is accommodated in my salary change, right? Enjoying our content? We'd love to hear more. Please like, comment, share, and find more.
I was trying to visualize, why would someone even suggest that? And I thought about this, and you tell me if even makes sense. But if I buy a Kit Kat, the the cost in New York City, or Pepsi, or a Coca-Cola, the cost in New York City might be, I don't know, $1, while the cost in Idaho might still be $1 because it's a Coke. I guess my response to that is, that's because it's made in one location,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what the cost defrayment is adjusting for. So there's not enough of a differential that you've got to account for, and that's why the Coke costs approximately the same wherever you go in the country. But I think the moment you are in a service business, which is what we're talking about, the cost of services differs. Your cost of hiring someone in central Idaho is more likely than not substantially lower than someone trying to hire someone in LA or New York City. The second one to me was, I think you came to this with a really interesting idea of, like, why don't we have sort of this charts-based system? Here's how we came up with your numbers, and sort of to have that transparency. I think two responses to that. If I was a sponsor, I'd go, I'm not going to put in that much effort. I just don't need to, because things will even themselves out. And as a site, my response would be, well, I don't want to be average. I'm not in the world to be average. I want to get as much as I possibly can. And that's why I would probably push back. So I think sites want fair market value until it's fair, and then you want more, which makes sense. I would probably want that too. So I'm not sure I disagree with that position, but that's also why we have ranges.
So if you look at it from the site's perspective, the site, if they want to ask for, even if they're, really high recruiting, high retaining site, performed well, et cetera, and we've seen this on LinkedIn recently. Several folks who are in site networks or, have large independent sites have talked about, hey, I effort tracked, right? I looked at exactly how much time it actually took my people to be this good at recruiting and retaining. And it does cost more than maybe another site that's located right down the street from me, because my people are doing more, but I've also effort tracked to show you this is the time, this is exactly how which is exactly what I would tell a site to do. If you want to push back on one of these, it's fair market value. You get this much for recruitment. If you're located in this type of a region, you're going to have data and analytics. What I don't understand about this, and where I can empathize greatly with sites, is, so if I'm a site, I have to document the hell out of why I should be pushing for more. And I would argue that's fair, right? Data warrants the pushback. So if I can show you I have success when I do it my proprietary way, but my proprietary way does cost you a bit more, but you get the results you want, people will pay for that level of quality and reliability. Having said that, the sponsor doesn't have to justify. Like, the sponsor does not have to be transparent in the sense of, like, when they play the negotiation games of, well, every other AMC agreed to this price, or this is the price point we always give, this is the range. There's not always the same level of transparency by the sponsor and or CRO, if they're handling the negotiation, as to how they arrived at the number or why they're pushing back on the extra.
Find related podcasts below.
The fact is that at a certain point, it's not the site that pays for overpayment to physicians. Sites just want the additional money, and no one's strictly, the DOJ, OIG is not going after sites. The fact is that DOJ, OIG says deep pockets, I will go to sponsors if there is overpayment, and I will attribute the worst reasoning possible and say that's why you overpaid. So I think, to your point, are they underpaying? I would argue that if I was a sponsor, I'm incentivized to almost overpay if I can, because number one, you want the best sites. Number two, some of these may be KOLs. Number three, these are going to be your prescribers if this study becomes successful. So, contrary to what sites seem to believe, I think sponsors are coming in there with, if I could, I'd pay you more, because I want to keep you happy. I don't want you pissed off at me. J. Paul Getty, at one point, he had Getty stations, and the richest private citizen in the world. And someone asked him, allegedly, Mr. Getty, you're like the richest private citizen in the world. Like, how much more money do you need? And his answer at that time was just a little bit more. It doesn't matter what number the sponsor comes to you with. Every site will go just like a little bit more. So I'm not convinced that we're not paying fair market value. I would argue that we're actually paying above fair market value in some cases. And I know that because when you talk to sites on an unrecorded format, they will tell you we're really happy with what we're being paid because I know what a third-party payer would pay these doctors, and we're being paid handsomely compared to that. So
maybe then the next point is, how does that, if there truly is that clarity, if there is an analysis happening at the sponsor level that is fair, that meets that principle of FMV, maybe then it's a matter of communication. What about that? Again, if that really was fair and or even potentially a generous payment without obviously going above and beyond or, ticking off any of the fraudulent claims here, how then could the sponsor and CRO do a better job of frankly explaining that to the site in a way that's not pedantic, right? Because clearly the sites have walked away with this. And I mean, we negotiate for a living. We would never advise a client to just go, yeah, that's good enough, so of course. But there's been something that's lost in that communication and something that's lost in sharing those metrics, that rubric, how we arrived at this magical number, where you can definitely sense it's palpable that what you're saying about how sponsors feel is present, while what I'm saying about how a lot of sites feel is still present. And I'm just wondering, what's the middle ground? Like maybe, and I know there's a lot of sites who would
hold
roll
on.
their eyes.
Edie,
Oh, go ahead.
don't. If you want to hear what Edie says after the words maybe, stay tuned. We're going to do another podcast on exactly that. Should sponsors disclose how they came up with fair market value? So stay tuned. We're going to have a podcast on that.
Very cool.
Edie, before we go, how can people reach us?
As always, our website, kulkarnilawfirm.com, and then our emails, Edye or Darshan at kulkarnilawfirm.com.
Call, click, or email.